want to manifest the money or the partner or, the house or the status. True unconditional love understands that the external has nothing to do with the internal, and it can never actually shift you.
And it's not like that the words changed, it's that you changed. And so you're seeing the message that you need to see at that time.
You literally contain all the answers within. It's just you forgot how to listen. It's not about learning something new. It's about unlearning all the shit.
The general consensus is kind of shattering reality as we know it.
I truly believe the second coming isn't Jesus coming here, isn't a new Messiah, but it's all of us realizing that we are Jesus.
What is it about the light that we're afraid of?
Everything. I felt like my insides were going to explode because I felt so much love.
Why does it feel uncomfortable though? Like why, if it's so good and it's who we are, why do we feel uncomfortable about that?
All of these things, you feel exhausted. You got to take a cold shower. You got to go do cold plunge. You got to do Whole30. You got to do all, like, what in the fuck have we done? All it takes is one to heal the whole.
Today, I am joined by Ashley Abramson, a solution-focused self-love mentor, trauma coach, and social worker gone rogue. Her clients like to call her the ego whisperer. She is also a 3-time international best-selling Amazon author. She works with individuals who can't stand the thought of another vanilla talk therapy session and creates a space for your ego to feel safe and to get to the root cause for why you feel stuck in life. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. I am so excited to have you here. And before we dive into everything self-love and trauma and universal energy, everything I know we're going to go deep into, I would love to start out hearing your own personal story of how you got to where you are today, the trials, the triumphs.
Yeah. I mean, I think like everybody, it started way before I can ever remember this journey. And I think it's the same journey we're all on, but it just tends to look different. So as a child, I always was just so curious and just had this extreme energy and love for life. And my father was so much like me, but he ended up, society said he was mentally ill and that wasn't good and he was childlike. So that's when I really was like, oh shit, I can't be like this. And I went through my life and eventually I attempted to take my own life and I was almost successful. And in that moment is really when I fully locked myself up because I realized like I can't even take my own life. So I must be here for someone else's life because for sure I'm not deserving of this life. And that's really when I set out to figure out why I was here and who I was here for. I think that's the most important piece here is who I was here to assist on their journey. My father ended up committing suicide. And again, that reiterated like life is not meant to be fun loving. It's meant to be very rigid and in a box and following all the rules and paying the bills and having that normal 9 to 5 with, benefits and 401k and all that junk. And so I met who's now my ex-husband, and he had a son at the time who was only 5 months old, and I fell in love. Not necessarily with my ex-husband, but with that little boy. And I realized, shit, this is why I lived. He had already been through a ton of stuff in his tiny little life. And I was like, I never want him to continue to experience pain and suffering like he is. So I'm going to dedicate my life to ensuring that his life is absolutely perfect. And in that time, I had been diagnosed with bipolar. I was told I would never work. I was told I couldn't even obtain a 4-year college degree. And for a moment, probably about 2 years, a significant moment, I lived that. I lived that narrative. I got on Social Security disability. Mind you, I was 18 years old. So my entire future was decided already. Like, you're screwed. You have to just sit in this box, never work, never any of these things. Until I researched like crazy, trying to figure out what the heck, who the heck am I really? And I read all these books outside of me. And at one moment I was like, This isn't us. We're not doing this. And I made it my mission to push through those constructs. And that was that little girl I had locked up. She always questioned everything. Nothing ever made sense to her. It just didn't resonate. But people always got frustrated when she asked questions. So I went to school. I got my 4-year degree in social work. I continued to work on my internal state of being and eventually was dismissed from having the diagnosis of bipolar. I no longer had to take medications and things were going amazing. I was really getting into the personal development movement of meditation and manifestation and reading all the books, and I was exercising. I was doing all these external things and I was feeling really good. I thought I was the happiest, healthiest, physically, mentally, emotionally I'd ever been in my entire life. And then boom. At 32 years old, I was getting a divorce and realized that everything outside of me was what determined how I felt inside. And the reason why I realized that is because everything outside of me was gone in a matter of seconds. All of my boxes, all of my labels, all the things I could post on the social medias and be like, hey, look at my house. We're decorating with all these Christmas lights. We're going on these great family vacations. You know, this facade that I didn't realize was a facade because I was doing all of the personal development. And then it was gone and I self-destructed. I realized personal development is not sustainable over time. Personal development is about you as an individual, when in fact you are not an individual. We are one. So when you focus solely on yourself, you are actually building up the reiteration in your mind of separation and sacrifice. It just looks really pretty and it feels really good. And yeah, it's a part of a lot of people's journey. You have to go through that ego development is what I call it, like strengthening the ego to the point that it will trust you to untie the ego, if that makes sense. And for 2 years, I completely fell apart and was doing things I never imagined I was capable of doing. At the time, my son was 15 years old and I failed. I failed my one reason why I lived, which was to ensure he never felt pain or suffering again. And this was extreme for him. Not only did he experience a divorce, I'm a firm believer, divorce doesn't hurt children. It's how the parents handled it. And we did not handle it well. Like I was like the most absent mom ever. I went from like the most involved mom to the most shut out absent mom. His dad self-destruct. Like it was just a mess. And this kid was just going into high school. He was entering 9th grade 4 days after I moved out. So I eventually got in trouble at work and was forced on to what they call reflective supervision, which now is coined reflective coaching. And it was really, at the time I was a social worker in child protection. I'd done so much training in trauma by leading experts around the world before it became this buzzword it is today. And I worked with clients on this, but I hadn't really worked on my own, not to the point that was necessary to truly make it through such a extreme event. I was still holding many grudges and much weight on these past experiences that had happened in my life. It was one of those, I forgive you, but I think we all do that today. We believe forgiveness is still acknowledging and holding the weight, but not throwing it in your face every day. It's just as bad to do that as it is to throw it in someone's face every day, because you still have all this weight you're holding on to. Forgiveness is really realizing that none of it freaking matters, and it's all a projection of your mind, and releasing the weight and realizing that it's an opportunity to find your way back home.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want to go back for just a moment to the ego, because there's so much in there that you said that's so good, and I want to just go a little bit deeper down these little trails. The ego. I've heard you talk about this, and you talk about the voice in your head, and how do you decipher for those that are listening, and they get those voices and they think it's, from their higher self or from God, but it's actually the ego, or vice versa. How can you decipher one from the other?
Well, that is the golden question. And part of the answer lies in the actual question, because if you have to question it, then you're experiencing duality, meaning there is an ego, there is a highest self, when in fact, there's really only your highest self. The ego is just like the smoke and mirrors. But there is a way to really tell, and it's looking at the outcome of the decision you made. Is it coming from pure love, or is it fear-based? And many people would immediately say it's coming from love, especially in this movement of manifestation and creating the life of your dreams. But if you actually got honest with yourself and asked yourself why until you got to the bottom, most likely it is actually from a state of fear, and a fear of death. So when we manifest, a lot of times we want to manifest the money or the partner or, the house or the status. I mean, I think that's primarily, if you look at the majority of the world's vision boards every year, it's got a house on it, it's got a car on it, it's got a husband and wife, it's got a fit body, all these external things.
Mhm.
Well, true unconditional love understands that the external has nothing to do with the internal, and it can never actually shift you. And when you ask yourself why enough, say it's the money piece. Well, what if you don't have that much money? Well, then I won't be able to pay my bills. Well, what if you can't pay your bills? Then I might be homeless. And what if you're homeless? I might get sick. And it always ends up to dying. And the ego belief system keeps you in this rat race of birth and death, making you believe that you can truly die. You can't die. Your body will appear to die, but you, who you truly are, the observer that, I think it's either Eckhart Tolle or, I can't remember, but he talks about, who is the I talk about? It's the observer, right? And that is eternal love. That is your true state of being. But the ego keeps you stuck by you believing that you were born and you are going to die. Because we literally, from the second we are born, everything in life we do to do before we die. Literally. If you think about everything you're doing, you're like, oh, I'm going to go have coffee with this friend. Well, why? You don't really feel like it. Well, because what if something happens to her? What if something happens to death? Right? It always comes down to death, which always shows you it's that of the ego. So you look at the outcome. Is this coming from a place of fear? Or is this truly just out of unconditional love and understanding that we are one? That's how you know. But you have to get honest. A lot of people can't get honest.
Yes. This reminds me of another conversation I had where we spoke about the ego and how it originates so far back, to the point where we needed it. It did serve us to have that fear because it kept us alive. But do you think now, because we've evolved so far from then, do you think that we have kind of outgrown it in a way that we no longer need it?
I don't think we ever needed it. I think we thought we needed it. I'm a believer that, well, first of all, the ego doesn't really exist. This is essentially like a dream, but the ego is the creator of the dream because of the initial separation where we thought about, hey, I want to go create on my own what that would be like. And in that instant we thought about it, that tiny mad idea, all this was created because of the shame and guilt we felt of separating from eternal love, right? Like, could you imagine if we were in a place of just constant orgasmic love where there is no duality and we had a moment of thinking of not being there, how much pain and suffering and shame and guilt would be? Well, guess what? That's what you're living right now. This has already all occurred. This is just, it's like watching a movie and you get to choose who you watch the movie with. Do you want to watch it with the ego? So it's coming from a state of fear and anxiety and separation and sacrifice, or do you want to watch it with your highest self? And that's where you can really see everything as the mirror for love and a cry for love that it actually is. And that's when, Buddha said, I'm awake. But the problem is the people that heard it were coming from the place of the ego. So they heard Buddha's awake within the dream. But what Buddha meant was, I'm not in this dream anymore. I've realized I'm the dreamer of the dream. But when we have people that get to this place of enlightenment and they're coercing with people still stuck in the ego belief system, the beauty of being in enlightenment is you no longer see the ego. You no longer witness the fear. All you see is love. But when little Joe comes to you and he's coming from the ego and he's like, hey, is this what Buddhism is? Is it X, Y, and Z? Well, all Buddha's seeing is the beauty and the love, not the fear that was written into that and the shame and sacrifice and suffering, because Buddha's above it. Buddha's not within the dream anymore. Buddha is outside of the dream. Same for Jesus, same for Mother Teresa, same for Shakespeare. All of these people that were at a place that when you are still within the dream and someone is speaking up here, you're not communicating on the same level. So it's not received the same way. So kind of went off on a tangent, but ultimately the ego never needed to exist. It was out of our shame and guilt to kind of run away because we felt so much shame and guilt for the thought we had, because we believe that we're in trouble, but we're really not in trouble. So that's this journey. This journey is untying that deep-seated shame and guilt that continues to project out in our everyday life. One of my favorite quotes or statements from, I think, A Course in Miracles is, you're never actually upset for the reason you believe you are.
I love that. I love A Course in Miracles. I am with you 100% on everything you're saying, but I would not be doing my due diligence here if I did not challenge the ideas.
Right.
So for those that are listening, you can't have, or can you have beauty without the ugliness? Can you have pain without the pleasure? Because I know you're speaking as if, you know, this reality is an illusion and, you know, none of this is real. And again, I'm with you, but how can you explain that and also explain yin and yang and duality?
Okay. So the illusion is based out of separation, right? The ego created this illusion for us to hide in, right? Like, these are analogies I'm using, parables, so it's easier for us to understand. So it was like we're the kid that was like, hey, I wonder what it would be like to go create without dad. And then all of a sudden we're like, shit, this sucks. This is scary. And you know, a child, when they do something like spill milk, they immediately run because they think they're going to be in trouble, even if they're not going to be in trouble. And you have to go get them and bring them back to the situation. That's exactly where we are at. But because we thought we separated, which we never actually did, we just kind of went to sleep in our dreaming, we separated, then everything we created was out of separation. So this illusion, because it was created from separation, is all separation. And the only way to have separation is to have duality. So when I talk about eternal love, that's not in this illusion. There's reflections of it in it that you can see, right? Because this illusion is a projection. It is outside of the illusion. It is where pure oneness exists. So duality is always illusion based. Anytime you find yourself, I tell my clients, the duality roller coaster. So we've become, especially in America, we've become this society of people believing that happiness is way up here. It's those dopamine hits. It's like, yes, that I am happy, like that, super exuberant. But the problem is that's of the illusion. That's not of truth. If you think of some of the happiest people in the world, they're monks. And they aren't like flying high or going low. It just is. And that's where Buddha was. That's where Jesus was. That was where Mother Teresa was. It wasn't about the highs. It was about just being in this state of pure joy and peace. But we've been trained to believe that joy looks like this high experience, but that's the duality roller coaster. So if you're seeking the high experience, the other shoe will always drop because the roller coaster has to come down. And you can choose to get off at any moment. And that's shifting your perspective from that of fear to that of love. Dopamine hits are fear. Dopamine hits are based out of needing external validation to reiterate that you're okay within.
How would you suggest that someone could get off the roller coaster when they want to? Is there anything that you do personally or anything that you tell your clients that they can do if there's something that is emotionally affecting them in a way that they no longer want to feel in the moment that they could use to get off?
Yeah. So I think you can always get off by shifting your perspective. So it's taking that observer, right, that eye, and just getting curious without judgment of like, what is this really happening? Because it never has to do with the other person or anything outside of you. I promise you. So say like you've been cheated on or anything like that, has nothing to do with that person, everything to do with you, because you get to choose your perspective. And if you choose to see it as love instead of fear, then it just is, right? It's just that place. But unless you've gotten really curious in your life prior to that, it probably won't be very easy to pull yourself apart out of the duality roller coaster. So it's really, I came up with CPR squared for spirit. And what it is personal development, spiritual development has created this chaos in the simplicity. It's actually very, very simple. Not always easy, but it's simple. But we've created this whole movement of chaos to again distract us, but it feels really good distraction, right? Like, let's make vision boards. Let's do cold showers. If I don't get a cold shower today, I'm not having a good day. You know, all those things, they feel good, but they're just another distraction. And CPR squared for spirit is the fundamentals of any transformation. And it's get curious, shift your perspective, release the weight, and remember your truth. Like that is literally at any moment, if you want to shift anything, that is what you do, period. You don't need another personal development book. You don't need another, spiritual development book. Just do that because you literally contain all the answers within. It's just you forgot how to listen. It's not about learning something new. It's about unlearning all the shit that you learn that's providing you this like veil. People always talk about the veil from the truth and remembering it and actually internalizing it. I want to share this funny thing. So I was on YouTube the other day and randomly this guy's thing popped up. YouTubers are always playing video games. Like I feel like that's how YouTube started, was watching people play video games. I don't play video games, but I saw the title and I'm like, this sounds cool. He was walking around video games telling NPCs, so the non-active player, whatever, the one that's not operated by someone, that they were in, like that where they were was a video game and that they were just code and all this stuff. And they're like, but friend, this is a beautiful world and I love walking around every day. And I was like, damn, that's how I feel every freaking day when I'm trying to share this message. Is like, it's like the allegory of the cave, Plato's allegory of the cave. And we have so many levels within this illusion that are new representations of the illusion that we can say, yeah, that guy's at NBC. I'm trying to tell him this. But if someone comes to you and says, hey, you're not really here, you're like, hell if I ain't.
Do you think it's safe to say that you are living in 5D? And do you think it's also safe to say that because you hit such a low earlier on in your life, being suicidal and everything, that allowed you to reach this new level of perception?
Yeah. So a couple of responses there. 5D would be a level of consciousness. Consciousness, again, is a part of the illusion. So when you're outside of the illusion, there's no level of hierarchy, there's no separation, right? So if there's not hierarchy or separation, there can't be levels of consciousness. It just is. So within the illusion, yeah, levels of consciousness can help you to understand better the untying of yourself from the illusion. But I think today we have this massive new age movement of let's gain higher level consciousness. Great. But you need to know you're just being more awake within the dream, but not awake. You're still just as asleep. You're just making a more vibrant dream. It's like when we went from the old tube televisions to now, like, I don't know, what are we at, 8K, 10K? I don't know. You can almost walk into the television and be a part of it. And one day you will be, right?
Maybe we already are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we definitely are not in a place that is truth. I can tell you that. So maybe I'm at 5D. I don't know. I don't like spend time attempting to be that, or to really look at that when it comes to levels of consciousness. But the interesting thing is we plan to sail the world, and we're going to name it fifth dimension sailing because it's a play on consciousness. So if we think about it, and supposedly this world is 3D, right? And then they say 4D is like the like aliens and stuff, right? Isn't that how it goes?
I'm not as familiar. I hear a lot
Yeah.
about 3D and 5D.
Yeah. So I think there's like a 4D in between. And then our thing is like, well, 5D is outside of the illusion. It doesn't even actually exist, but it's how you meet people where they're at within the illusion. But truly, do I like work to try to get to higher level consciousness? No, I want to realize I'm the dreamer of the dream and wake up from the fucking dream, because I'm done with pain and sacrifice and separation. And it's time for the second coming of Jesus. I truly believe the second coming isn't Jesus coming here, isn't a new Messiah, but it's all of us realizing that we are Jesus. We are just like, he was the big brother that did it first. You know, your big brother goes and rides his bike around and you're like, I'll never be able to do that. And then he's like, no, let me help you. And that's really where we're at. Once we all get home and this illusion ceases to exist, is really the second coming. But that's a whole nother conversation.
I feel
So
like,
then, oh, go ahead.
no, go on.
Was going to say, so your second answer about being suicidal, there was so much more in my life that had to happen after, in order for me to really get to this place of there has got to be another way. And I think in order for people to truly understand this, they have to get to that place. And the only reason why I was able to is because I've tried everything. So when I talk about like the new age movement, or I talk about religion, or, you know, all these things, it's not because I haven't experienced them. It's because when I go into something, I go all in. And every single time I went all into religion, I went all into the new age movement, I went all into, you know, almost atheism. It was like, but this still doesn't quite make sense. There's still something missing. And when I really got to the place of it was like my final stages in the new age movement, I was having a conversation with a friend about Reiki. And he was talking about how it's okay to let the bad spirits come in, and because they need to help us too. And it just wasn't hitting right with me. There was more to the conversation, of course. And then all of a sudden it came to me. I was like, but I think Jesus is real. But I was like, but not like I learned in church. That doesn't hit me right either. And I was like, there's something missing here. There's got to be another way. And I messaged my mentor, and she led me to, she's like, I think there's a book that will answer a lot of your questions. I can't answer them. I still haven't even grappled with this book myself, but it's time for you to have it. And it was The Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard. And that was my first introduction into what is known as A Course in Miracles. I almost feel like I'm going to cry tell you about this, because it was like, holy shit, this little girl's been asking questions her entire life, and these were the answers she always knew. It wasn't this intellectual understanding of like, oh yeah, this makes sense. It was this deep-seated, oh fuck, that is what we've been searching for.
Yes. Like it just like a full body resonates.
Yeah, it was like yeah, the observer was like, yeah, this is what I've been trying to guide you to the entire fucking time, but you haven't listened.
Yeah, and for those who are not familiar with the Course in Miracles, maybe we could give them a kind of like a brief description of what that is. I never got through the whole thing, but I do know the general consensus is kind of shattering reality as we know it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to encompass it. What I can say is it's a book that doesn't find you by happenstance.
Yes.
It's a book that can change your life. It's like taking the elevator instead of the stairs. So does everybody have to subscribe and believe in the Course in Miracles? No. People can find their way home through church, through all these other ways, but it might take many more lifetimes. The Course is like the fast track to untying yourself from the ego and being supported in the process. It would be the equivalent, I guess. I don't want to necessarily say that. It's a book that was scribed by a woman who was actually an atheist. I think that's very key to understand. She was a professor, I believe a professor of psychology, Helen Schuckman. And all of a sudden she started like getting this channeling, and she kept trying to ignore it, and life just got miserable. And it's believed that Jesus channeled it to her, which essentially we're all one, right? So we are Jesus. She was just an open vessel for the words to come through from our big brother to guide us home. And she really struggled, my understanding, during her lifetime to actually fully incorporate the Course into her own life, which is so beautiful, because I think one of the issues we had with Jesus coming was that we put him on a pedestal. We decided like we gotta worship him, and that is the last thing he wanted. Like, the crucifixion was not about him dying for our sins. It was about him telling us, you can't sin because you're not a body. Look at, they tried to kill this body, but here I am again, because I'm outside of the dream, so I can actually manipulate within the dream. That's how he did all this, what was it called, miracles and wonders, where he walked on water and he moved mountains and he dealt, because when you are the one creating the dream, which we are, we just haven't figured out how to manipulate it like Jesus in that manner, you can do whatever, because you know it's not real. And so I think for Helen writing the Course, if she would have learned the Course perfectly and been this beautiful representation of what integrating the Course looks like in your life, we've been screwed again. We would have created another false idol to worship and everything else. But instead, it came through this woman that you'd think would be the last person to ever write this book, ever, channel this book, so that we can't worship her. Instead, we got people being like, oh, this is made up, which if you actually read the book, you're like, there's no effing way someone could make this up. Like, this is so out of this world. And the cool thing about it is, at the beginning, Jesus talks to you as the baby you are. And when I say baby, it's like, if we think of it like how most people talk, your veil is so thick. He can't talk to you outside of the illusion. Like I told you earlier, like with fifth dimension sailing and stuff, that's an in illusion discussion. But what I really believe is outside of here. But when you're talking to people, you still have to meet them where they're at. You can't be like, hey, this blah, blah, blah. It's so above their head and not understood. So Jesus uses the language of the illusion at the beginning, but as you move further and further along in the Course, the language changes because you have changed. You're on a different rung of the ladder, and we all start at the bottom rung of the ladder. But I think with the Course, many people don't stick with it, and they're like, it doesn't work, because they just saw it as another personal development book. It's not. This is a way of life. And also, a lot of people misinterpret the Course, right? Because just like I told you before, like people misinterpreted Buddha and Jesus because they were in the ego lens. So they saw them through the ego lens. So like some people say the Course teaches you to manifest and teaches you, how to practice all this magic. It talks about it in there that, yeah, of course you can do that. But that's the ego. Like if you make anything of value in this, if you make what is valueless of value, then you're just driving yourself deeper into the illusion. I don't know. I went off on lots of tangents, but the cool thing about the Courses too, is that it's not meant to be a religion. It's not meant to bring people together and create cults and all of that. It's really your individual journey. With Jesus, with the Holy Spirit, and finding your way back home. Yeah, there's support groups and things like that, communities that have come together. But it does say in the end that the final step will always be taken by God. And at that moment, you must surrender everything and realize nothing was real, even the Course. right? So it even says to you, like, this is just a walking stick, my friend. This is not real. This is to get you to the point that you can realize how unreal everything is. So yeah, that kind of went off.
I like how you said in the beginning that you're not going to find it by accident, because it's definitely one of those scenarios where when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And also to your point that different people get different things out of it. It's like when you watch a movie and then you watch the same movie 10 years later and it's totally different to you, or reading a book and then reading a book 10 years later and you get something completely out of it. So it's like, and it's not like that the words changed, it's that you changed. And so you're seeing it, the message that you need to see at that time.
Yeah.
There's something else that you talk about, which is being in the darkness and how we're afraid of the light. So what is it about the light that we're afraid of?
Everything. First of all, it's what got us here, right? Because we believe we left it and we don't believe we're worthy of it. And we've been so conditioned to live in this illusion of ego and fear and sacrifice and separation and individuality. I think that's a really big piece, because in the light, there is no individuality. And literally, if you look, like, we are coming up with new groups every other fucking day that describe that this is a new group. I think like neurodiversity is a new group. And I'm not trying to cast meanness or judgment on these people. I'm just making an observation that we constantly are trying to make us even more of an individual than we were yesterday, which is bringing us further and further and further from the truth. Because to admit that you are not special, like I'm no different than you and you're no different than me, Jessica, would shatter the entire reality. And we know that subconsciously, right? So if you, it's so much easier to live a life of pain and suffering than it is to of this like pure blissful love. And when you start to go on the journey of untying the ego, however you do that, you'll get glimpses of it. And I remember the first time I got it and really was aware of it, I was like, this is so, like, I don't, like, I feel like my skin is crawling, right? Like, I don't know what to do with myself. I've never felt like I felt like my insides were going to explode because I felt so much love. I was like, this is uncomfortable. But I was intentionally going there. If you're not intentionally going there and you felt that, you would think like you're having a mental breakdown. Like we tell people that who are filled with love and running through the streets naked and they're like, I just love the world. I love it. They're like, oh my gosh, call the ambulance. That person is gone schizo.
Why does it feel uncomfortable though? Like why, if it's so good and it's who we are, why do we feel uncomfortable about that?
Because everything is backwards and upside down in this illusion. So again, we've been taught things feel a certain way, experiences are meant to, and we haven't been taught that, because if we were to experience that, the ego knows that it would cease to exist. So again, using like parables or like analogies easier for me to understand in you, like if we created the ego and we know the ego belief system knows that if at any moment we start to untie from the ego, that it will cease to exist. It's going to do everything to fight because it doesn't want to die. It wants you to die. Itself doesn't want to die. And the way it keeps you in control is by you dying or you thinking you're dying, right? Your body. So when you go on the journey of starting to untie the ego and you have some of these experiences, you have what I call an ego rally. And the first time I ever witnessed an actual ego rally was back when I wanted to guide people on psychedelic journeys, because I had a psychedelic journey and it was super impactful for me. And now in my business, I'm to the point, well, not in my business, in my life, where you can take people there as long as you're cleared out enough. I had a woman once tell me, Ashley, talking to you is like going on a mushroom trip. Without the mushrooms, you take us to a place of love and authenticity that nowhere else can but drugs. So I really don't believe you need drugs because that's another layer of the illusion. But there was a moment I thought that that was the answer for everyone. Like, you got to take drugs, man. We got to take you to this place, and then you got to figure out how to integrate and blah, blah, and all this stuff. I led 3 women through a psychedelic trip, along with another woman. And it was such a beautiful experience. So many things came up, and I was a firm believer that they needed to be prepared for it and then to do like integration after. And so we did that. And at one point they were ready to like begin working on themselves and really doing deep inner child work and all these different things. And then it was like a light switch hit. And they went so far back into the ego. I was like, what in the F is going on? And I found out that it was the ego rally. And that happens when you're untying the ego. So even if it's a forced untie through drugs, or it's you actually doing the work, the ego gets scared and is like, oh my gosh, we're going to die. This person's going to realize we don't even exist. We've got to attack however we can. And that's when your body will be used. That's when your mind will be used. That's when external projections will be used. Anything that is of the illusion can be used through the ego belief system. Period.
So it latches on even more when.
But it's really you. I mean, like, this is a whole metaphysical conversation that we would go deeper. Right now, I've externalized the ego, which is just to help people understand where they're at.
Right. So the underlying message I'm getting really from everything here is that we are love. So when it comes to self-love, that's what we are. Our self is love. And everything else on top of it is just things that we have been taught and that we've internalized since birth and even beforehand, and that we have to undo it. We just have to basically get rid of all the stuff on top, and underneath is the love that we are.
Yeah, like love. That's why your highest self never fights. So the ego is chaotic. That's how you always know it's the ego too. It's chaotic and it's always fighting for your attention. So have you ever lied to someone?
Never. Yes, of
I
course.
don't believe you. Okay. But when you lie to someone and they question you, you're like, no, like for sure. Like, I'm telling you the truth. Like, you are like over exaggerated, making sure they believe you. But if you told someone the truth and they say you're lying to me, you're like, whatever, like you'll figure it out. Like, I'm not going to sit and waste my time if you don't want to believe me. Because it's truth. The ego and the Holy Spirit, your highest self, whatever the heck you want to call it, are the same. Ego knows it's lying to you, knows it's an illusion, and knows it has to create obstacles and smoke and mirrors and shiny objects to keep you distracted from your highest self, which is truth. Your highest self can see the entire picture, knows the ending, knows exactly how tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day are going to go. So it just sits back in its easy recliner and waits for you to come knocking on the door and be like, I'm ready. But it will not fight for your attention because it doesn't need to. It's truth. It doesn't need to fight for you. So when you feel something fighting for your attention, that is 100% the ego belief system. If it's chaotic, if it's coming from a place of fear, if it's not simple, right? Simple and easy are 2 different words. Remember that. If it's not simplistic, then it is for sure the ego. That's why when you look at personal development, like it is so chaotic. I mean, like, it is ridiculous how many different personal development things are there now, like so many renditions, because we've taken the most simple thing, which is to get curious, shift your perspective to that of love, release the weight, and remember who the F you are. And we've created it into like the high 5 rule, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the manifest the dreams, like all of these things. You feel exhausted. You got to take a cold shower. You got to go do cold plunge. You got to do Whole30. You got to do all, like, what in the fuck have we done? But it's another way to keep us distracted because we were at a place, the mind was at a place where it was starting to like get bored and catch on. Like, Maybe there is something out there. So boom, the ego created something out there, and it's called the New Age movement. It's all about energy and human design and getting to a higher level consciousness and making a better dream.
Yeah, we're definitely not at a loss for distractions.
No, there's so many.
I could talk to you about all of this all day long. I have one final question for you, but before I ask it, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to share or talk about?
I mean, I'm a pretty open book. I love to have conversations. And I'm always sharing on my YouTube. So, I mean, I don't know. I think there's so much. I think the biggest piece I always leave a podcast with is remember you're worth it.
Mm,
I think we don't hear that enough. I think we don't realize that enough. And all it takes is one to heal the whole. So if you ignore yourself, then you're actually ignoring the whole.
yes, that's so good. Speaking of finding you on YouTube, where else could people get more from you? Obviously, you do have your books on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are collective books. So I have a chapter in 3 different books. I am currently working on writing, hopefully, a book on CPR squared, just really the fundamentals of any transformation. But I am on my business Facebook page, which is Big Miracle Energy. My website is Big Miracle Energy, and my YouTube is Big Miracle Energy. And then I have a Patreon channel as well. And there's going to be some shifting of what things look like come the new year. I'm really moving towards just sharing like crazy. I feel like, we get so distracted with the numbers. You and I talked about this before we hopped on here, and how many followers do I have and how many clients do I have and how blah, blah, all the shiny objects again. But the reality is, outside of the dream, your highest self knows we're all one. It doesn't see numbers. So if you literally only impact what appears to be one person in this illusion, you have literally impacted the entire illusion. You have impacted the whole, the everyone. And you can only receive by giving. Right? I cannot receive what I'm not willing to give, because then I'm acknowledging the separation. And if what I'm withholding from you, I'm withholding from myself, because we are one. So I say this because I do videos like crazy. I record almost 5 videos a week. I drop most on my Patreon, but that may be shifting, and there may be a huge amount of videos coming out. But I do that because I know every time I share, I'm receiving. So even if only one person ever watches those videos, it's changing the entire mind.
I love that perspective. And everything will be in the description, of course, so that you can find more from Ashley. And before I let you go, what is your number one health tip? Whether it's mindset, diet and nutrition, physical, emotional, just the one piece of advice you would like everyone to know.
Get curious. I think I think that fits into every single one of the categories you brought up. Curiosity did not kill the cat. It actually saved the cat. And if you can cultivate that skill even stronger, I mean, we all have it in us. Think of a child. They ask why 5 million times. But if you start to cultivate that, you can literally make it through anything. You can literally do anything you've been seeking, because is literally the first step. If you aren't aware, how are you going to change anything, right? So if you try a new health fad and you're like, why isn't it working for me? Oh, it just must not work for me. Well, that's not helpful. But if you're like, let me take a curious lens from the non-judgment, why is this not working for me? And you realize, well, because I cheated every other day and I was still doing X, Y, and Z, even though I was doing this. Duh, that's why. But when you get curious, you come from a place of no judgment. So just like that curious cat of like, oh, okay, Jessica, why are things looking this way? The outsider.
Yes. Question everything, guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Question everything.
Thank you so much, Ashley. This has been a really fun conversation, and thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
That concludes this episode. If this resonated with you, please give it a rating and review. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. Links are in the show notes. I sincerely thank you for your time and your presence.